Welcome to today's episode. Hey, 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 here we are in the podcast room, and I'm sitting across the table from Jeff Heilman of the Jeff Heilman Project, reminding us all that we are all works in project. I think that the saying goes works in what is it? Work in
process.
Work in process. We like to call us works in project. Anyways, I thought it would be really fun today to get started in this episode. If you would do me a favor and shout out 3 people that you know are listening to this podcast right now.
3 people that I know
just shout them out. Just say, hey.
That I know I'm listening right now.
That knows that you know are listening to this podcast right now.
Kara.
Hey, Kara. How's it going?
I'm trying to think. I don't know. Steve Ryder, maybe.
Maybe. Well, just shout out anybody who's
Rush.
mentioned. I mean, we are so appreciative of everyone who's been giving us comments about the podcast. Hi, Dad. Hi, Mom. I know you guys are listening. I know the kids also. We've got 7 of them, so that's at least 7 additional downloaders.
The downloads.
The 5-year-old,
are
she's really good.
Yeah.
she's really on the ball.
She clicks 3 times a day at least.
Well, we really appreciate it, and so I just wanted to take a minute and say thank you, and thank you to so many people that have made such great comments. Thank you to is it Michelle? You've had some really good feedback. We've had also feedback, which is why you see our little fuzzy navels here.
Yeah.
If you're just listening,
these are made of lint.
Yeah, exactly. If you're listening online and not watching
Grandma's
the
sweater.
YouTube channel, we have got new microphone covers to hopefully help us with our P's and our S's. We've been in the studio practicing with Peter Piper picked up pickled peppers, and
Sean Mulvaney would probably be able to take credit for helping us
with that. Well, thank you. Hopefully our S's are a little bit better. But to get started with today's episode, really to continue with today's episode. Today's episode is the value, the fourth value. Is it the fourth value? Third value?
Yeah.
The third value. We have so many that we're going through in the 9 daily disciplines.
Not 12, not 100, not 4.
Okay.
9 core values.
Today's value in order is actually order. And I thought it was interesting when I was doing research on the word order, that order is one of those rather interesting words that is both a noun and a verb. Not every word in the English language can say that.
Well, until 2020.
And so, because it is both a noun and a verb, it actually has, I was surprised to find, according to the Oxford Dictionary, it has like 13 different definitions, everything from giving an authoritative command as an order to a group of people, like the nuns and the monks. They are also considered
known as an order of the monks.
And so there's quite a few different definitions to the word order. I was thinking about when you order at a restaurant, you're ordering at a restaurant, and then they make your food made to order, which is your specific
order, which is a verb,
right?
And then you receive your order, which is a noun.
Exactly. So in today's episode, and in order, with your with your list, with your daily checklist, I would like you to maybe tell us which definition or which category does your point of view when it comes to order fall in most effortlessly. What does order mean to you? What does order mean to me as a
this is such a I'm so excited about this one. I had a friend of mine, a very good friend, say to me that you can't be the expert of your own podcast. And so I was very much challenged by that comment, because I don't want to be, nobody likes a know-it-all, right? Nobody wants somebody that just feels like they got all the answers. And I absolutely don't want to be that guy. That said, it is our podcast together, you and me, Mr. and Mrs. Heilman. I've also had friends that said, why don't you put Jessica's name in the podcast? And I think that that's come up 3 or 4 times, and I think it's important to address that in this because
I'm perfect. You're the
yeah,
project.
I'm the work
Yes.
in project. You're
That
like
couldn't
Mary
be that
Poppins.
couldn't be further from the
My
truth.
wife
We're
is like
both.
Mary Poppins. She is practically perfect in every way, and I hope that she doesn't just stay until the wind changes. Um, that it is a project. I'm a project. I was, we're all kind of broken when we come up and we're young people, and we need to be not necessarily fixed, but repaired or completed. And
Or
so,
put in
or
order.
put in order. And so the whole concept of, well, why is Jessica not on the podcast? It's because if there's a train wreck in this family, it's me, and the train wreck needs to be repaired and structured. And it's kind of the story about how Jessica has helped put Humpty Dumpty back together again so that I could be productive and happy. And the lessons learned from those hits and the misses where things don't always go right, or they take 3 or 4 attempts to get into a period of prosperity and growth and rhythm and momentum and all the things that we talk about in our family about what we want to what we want our lives to be like. So for the people out there, we do not think that certainly that we don't know it all. Certainly that I don't know it all. But in the process of going from not very good to good, and then from good to great, and then from great to as good as we can possibly be in our lives, the Jeff Heilman project is about what Jessica's done to put Humpty Dumpty back together again, and the lessons learned, and that hopefully by going through all the mistakes and the things that we have done wrong and how we've overcome them, that it would be not only encouraging, but hopefully super educational if we allow the natural levity in our relationship to remain, that levity would be fun and lighthearted and entertaining, because this is not just an educational show saying you need to do these 17 things or you're not going to have a great 5:30 a.m. CEO level wake up morning routine. That's not the premise for this. It's supposed to be fun, it's supposed to be entertaining, lighthearted, plenty of levity, but mostly making fun of all the stupid stuff that I had to figure out how not to do in order to keep this family running and going forward. So let's talk about order for a little bit on this topic. And I want to talk about the fact that um, for 30 years, it started out, I don't remember what the six were, which six, but they looked kind of like this. I can show you in the camera. 6 circles. I had 6 circles that I had on a page, and they were like family, money, health, and then I added a couple more. I think I added recreation and social um, over time. But I started out writing these 6 circles, and I was like, okay, what are we doing this week for family? What are we doing this week for money? What are we doing this week for health? And then eventually it was 8, and for like 20 years there were 8 circles, and it was 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8. Every week I would go through, what are we doing for family, what are we doing for health, what are we doing for money this week, in order to keep some sort of structure to our day and our daily goal setting. And then about 2 years ago, and for the folks that are under 25, you may not be able to really relate to this, although you may be. For the folks that are 40 and over, I guarantee you can relate to what I'm about to say. When you push yourself to the absolute edge of exhaustion day after day after day after day with a burning, driving, ferocious attempt to get some project done. I don't care if it's finding a spouse and getting married, trying to have kids, and you go through, the processes and
IVF.
chemicals, IVF, and all that stuff. Getting a business over the hump, getting your finances in line, getting together on a budget, losing 25 pounds or 50 pounds or 100 pounds. When you burn into your mind a single goal, um, a lot of times when you're relaxed, after you're done sleeping, first thing in the morning, after you drift off to sleep at night, the subconscious mind will pick up on that hardcore emotional energy to master something, and it will feed us hunches. And we can talk about where the hunches come from on another podcast. They could be you might believe they come from God, or they come from the ether, or they come from outer space or Martians or whatever. Personally, I believe they come from God, and they're translated through spirit into our subconscious mind, and then from the subconscious they cross over to the conscious mind. They give you ideas, which is why I sleep with a pen and piece of paper next to my bed so I can write that stuff down. Anybody over the age of 40 is gonna say, yeah, I've had that happen to me at least a handful of times.
Well,
And
it sounds like what you're talking about to me is when something's not working, when
or
a
when you're
video
working
game, like
at something, yeah,
let's be
yeah,
real, when you're
17-year-olds,
when
right, playing
you're
video games.
1980s and you're growing up at the arcade and your favorite video game has a sign on it and it's not working, it says it's out of order. It's not, it isn't properly functioning the way that it should be. Maybe there's some cogs out of place. Maybe
Yeah,
there's something not quite lining up. And so they call it being out of order. And so I think from what I'm hearing from what you're saying is the order that we're talking about today, the order that you found out is probably by, by the school of hard knocks. There were things, there was moments, there were things in your life that were not lining up that felt very out of
almost,
order.
almost. Actually, let me stay on
Yeah, sure.
the thought of the epiphany that comes when you're really burning to try to get something done. I don't know when it hit me, but it was probably within the last 2 years. I woke up in the middle of the night and I was like, order, order's what's missing. Structure and detailed disciplined plans, order. That is the ninth circle that needs to be added to this. And there were 8 for 20 years. And I literally woke up in the middle of the night one night and I was like, no. There's something missing from this. And it's order and discipline and structure
How
that
fascinating
says,
that missing value would be moved up to like number 4 on your list.
yeah, it's number 3. It's number 3 on
number
the list.
3 on the
It's
list. It's
really,
pretty incredible how
really
we can
important.
all think that we're like nearing the road of completion and then something pops up and we're like, oh crap, I should have been focusing on that the whole
Yeah.
time.
I
But
I really honestly thought if I just put my shoulder into the work and made enough money, I could overcome, by making enough money, all of the lackadaisical, lack of discipline, lack of daily checklist, lack of an
well, that's
annual
perfect. I'm glad
calendar.
that you brought that up because for a long time, one of our favorite quotes was make a
You
mess.
have these conversations at home.
Make a big mess, and then if you're so crazy making such a big mess, eventually you'll be able to pay and have somebody clean it up later. Like that was kind of
Clean it
the
up
MO was
later.
clean it up later, clean
Get
it
your
up
business
later.
built. Yeah, that was kind of our training, was get your
Yeah.
business built.
Make a mess.
Make a mess. Get your $20, $30, $40,000 a month coming in, and you can
Do you not
pay
subscribe to that
fix.
philosophy any longer?
I think that we have a big mess. I think that we've had a big mess for a long time. I think 7 kids is a mess. I think the kind of income that we're making.
I subscribe to the fact that life's messy.
Yeah, and let's go back. Let's take a moment in time. Let's go back to 1996 in November. I was shopping for Bibles. We had been married for 4 months, and I was shopping for Bibles, and I realized that there were different versions because I'd never bought a Bible before. Christopher Johnson, who was on last week's podcast, what's up, Christopher? Thank you for being on the health podcast, episode 5. 5? Yeah, I think it's 5.
Yeah, Andrew's nodding his head.
Andrew's working behind the cameras today, and
Yeah.
certainly grateful for his
Every day.
editing. So we're excited to see our young man growing in the ways of audio video. I didn't. Christopher gave me my first copy of a paperback version of a Bible. It was a Catholic Bible. It had the Deuterocanonical Apocrypha in the middle of it. I don't know what 20 plus books that are added to it that were not part of the King James uh, the abridged King James version. That's a mock-up because King James Bible is like 1,375 pages long, so for it to be abridged is a little bit of a play on words. But according to the Catholics, it's abridged. And I didn't have a Bible, and I wanted something that would be leather, that would kind of get old and get worn in, and there would be some patina, and it would be nice, and the pages would be really high quality. So I started shopping for Bibles, and I thought, well, there's all these different versions. How do I pick which version? And I thought, in traditional King James standard standard metrics, logical deduction of reasoning, I thought, well, I should pick a Bible verse and just compare that from one to infinity number of versions that there are out there. And so I just kind of flipped through, and I'm like, all right, boink, put a
Yeah.
dartboard on the wall and throw a pin at it. And I came up with the very first scripture that I ever memorized, which was Proverbs 14:4. And if you have your King James Bible with you, I'm paraphrasing because I don't think I have it exactly right, but it says, "Where no oxen are, the crib is clean, but much increase comes from the oxen." And to me, that could be a scripture that defines my life, because I've tried to be structured and disciplined about things, but you can get to the point, and God bless, my father-in-law was saying this on the phone earlier today. He says you tend to analyze things like to death sometimes, Jeff, and I think he's right. Um, but uh, I think that you can be too clean. You can certainly clean and be sanitary to the point where there's nothing going on because things have to be too perfect. But I think that my bias for the longest time has been not clean enough. And we've made a huge mess. We have 7 kids. We have a house that, I still need to do my spring cleaning. I have spring cleaning ready to go, and I haven't gotten really started on it yet. Partly it's been raining and freezing outside. Um, but I think that we have a big enough mess now that we can run a cleaner, tidier ship, and that falls on me, right? If I'm the one who's driving this thing forward, and you're
Well, I think it falls
in
on you, but
partnership
then
with
it
me.
also falls into the understanding the more responsibilities you amass, the more control you have to delegate,
100%.
the more you have to take off your plate and trust or have systems in place that
100%.
are going to carry that heavy weighted load. I have a quote here that I wanted to share with you from Swiss philosopher Henri Frédéric Emile,
Henri
and
Frédéric
it says,
Emile.
order means light and peace, inward liberty, and free command over one's self. Order is power.
Can you read
And
that again?
I will read it again. Order means light and peace, inward liberty, and free command over one's self. Order is power.
I totally agree. I totally agree. And I think let me just take that
Yeah, please do. That's why I
concept.
brought it up. I want to run with it if we
What I
can.
think of it is, what I think of it as is, there's 2 analogies for that. One is in an internal combustion engine where you have a cylinder that's traveling. You have a piston that's traveling in a cylinder. The tolerances around that piston need to be really tight. You need to have a
Mm-hmm.
little bit of room so that it's not rubbing. You don't want metal on metal. That's why you have engine oil, in order to lubricate and make it possible
Mm-hmm.
for that little space, for just a little bit of space. But if you have too much room, if you blow an engine, or if you have too much room, or if there's too much wear, if sand or grit gets in there, and that gap between the piston and the cylinder gets to be too big, you'll lose the compression stroke, which is where the power from the engine comes from. And so there needs to be really tight tolerances, and that's what, in engineering, they talk about tolerances. So that's one area, um, with regard to an engine. The other thing is I work in software. Software needs to have very tight tolerances, and the software that I happen to be selling for the last several years is accounting software. Accounting software is in place to
Okay.
replace
You don't
spreadsheets.
just like round up every now and
No, you
again.
don't round up, right?
Or round down. Yeah.
You have to have precision, and
Mm-hmm.
the way that we run our business has precision, and the way that we have our spreadsheets are precision, and the way the software works is precision. And if there's codes, there's precision, even to the point where they're even making work now to eliminate any possibility for human changing of the database software itself, so that we can eliminate um, human error.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why that's important with regard to order and structure is, some might say, how could somebody run a big business? Let's say a Fortune 500 company. How could you run that business without order and structure in place because of the scale? And it's very true. And it's actually to the point where, in my opinion, if IT, information technology, and software were not made available to help a medium-sized business scale, you would never be able to get a business as big as they have become. It's the very order and structure on top of a great idea, a great culture, hard work ethic, differentiation in the market, and structure and order allows the business to scale from a few hundred people to a few 100,000 people. And I've worked for several companies that are at that size. So order, past a certain point, order literally becomes the building block of success.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the Jeff Heilman project, which might as well be called the Jeff Heilman history of screw ups. And I am the king of screw up for this analogy there. I did not place the proper amount of respect in order and structure and polish. And Kevin Ackroyd, who's a friend of mine, he'll be on another later episode of this, talked to me about that, and he effectively called me out on it in a very polite, very caring, and loving way. And he said he called it polish. So polish is structure, it's discipline, it's order, it is tidying up the details, and that's what this episode is all about, is drilling down into the hows and whats and whys. And I can tell you that I got to this understanding pretty late in life, late 40s, really, before I really got to the point where it's like, no, I don't go to the gym every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and sometimes Saturday from 5 in the morning to 7:30 in the morning. I won't go, because those are the time slots that I can commit, even to the point where it took me, 3 or 4 months of doing it. And then we added Andrew to the mix. And now it's a lot easier because I have an accountability buddy for lifting. But, otherwise I'll just make do and stay in bed.
Well, it seems like, from what I found, and maybe you can speak a little bit on this, in the beginning, when we're attempting to change and retrain into a pattern, that stark contrast where there was no order before to now you're becoming extremely disciplined, now you're becoming extremely structured, ends up being blaringly obvious in the beginning. But the more that you do it, the more that you become accustomed to it, the more that it becomes on almost, it ends up getting to be to autopilot, to where now you're sitting in front of, and hopefully you're not driving like dazed and confused, but you're, before you know it, now you're actually in front of the gym in your car, and you didn't even have to think twice about it. Or where you used to order McDonald's every
That's right.
time you drove by, you don't even know where the nearest McDonald's is anymore, because you've now become we are such creatures of habit. And I think that the book, that Power of Habit, it talks so eloquently about it, is we're such creatures of habit that it would not
Yeah.
be fair for us to attempt. So many people run and attempt to run away from the reality that we're creatures of habit, that even in our sloppiness, even in our laziness, we're doing something out of habit. And all we're
Yep.
talking about here is be intentional about what habits you're choosing to do. And then let's, create some new habits, which will become the structure that, continues, hopefully, to continue to grow.
Yeah.
Are there things, because what we have been talking about in these 9 weeks, on your checklist, what do you have in for the slot of order that you actually have to check off?
That's a great question. Okay, so going back to my insanity checklist here, 500 boxes a day, or a week anyway. So order. So we talked about faith. First checkbox is faith. Period.
Mm-hmm.
Second checkbox is and this would fall into order too, which is the key mile marker. So a key mile marker, I learned this from LinkedIn post a couple of weeks ago from Giodi Bonsall, who did App Dynamics. A young guy, built a business, sold it for 30 times revenues in 2017, and became a multi-billionaire overnight. App Dynamics is a super successful software business, acquired by Cisco, my alma mater. He talked about the 1 mile marker at a time. And so, what I've tried to do that I think has worked for me for the last 3 years is I've had one target in mind, and that has allowed me to say no to everything else. And when you go through, we're building it. We lost everything financially 3 years ago and had to build over from scratch. And the wonderful thing about chaos is that it makes it very easy to get super clear, super fast about what you absolutely have to do, and then everything else takes a back seat. And the problem with that long term is you can't never file your taxes. You can't never pay your credit card bills. You can't never make your car payment, right? But in the beginning, if you're like, okay, I can go without filing my taxes, I can go without going to the gym, I can go without, sending thank you notes for Christmas presents or whatever the thing is that's
Well, even saying I'll do it tomorrow is a habit.
yeah,
If
it's
you find
absolutely a
yourself
habit.
doing it
But
every day.
when you're in survival mode, when you are trying to
Right.
carve out an existence and go from, you know, 3 years ago, I had like $1,000 in the bank, was borrowing money from friends to pay rent, and that's bad, right? I lost a consulting business, I lost millions of dollars in stock, I lost a job at a Fortune 500
Would
company.
you say that it was a result of a lack of order that drove you
I
there?
think that
Or can it
I
be
think
economic, like circumstantial?
I think that it depends on a point of view. I think a case could be made to say that order played a role in job loss, financial unaccountability, losing money that we didn't need to lose. I think the big losses were more related to um, attitude attitude issues and points of view and
Mm-hmm.
philosophies on things. Um, but I do think that since I've added order to the nine thing checklist, and also added ordered structured thinking to the two aspects of mental toughness, uh, I think that had I been in the circumstances where things started to go south with this more ordered, structured mentality, I might have been able to right the ship and keep from getting us so close to crashing, you know, hanging up our landing gear in the treetops and crashing the plane, which was
Well,
what 2019
tell me about, I
was.
mean, we'll get back to the list and the check marks, but in the beginning, when you were first getting started out in sales, one of your many positions was doing over the phone credit card collections, and you said that you were doing okay, and then the guy that worked there that told you about the
Oh,
jar,
yeah.
that became order, and as a result of the order that you put in place with the jar, and I'll let you share that
Oh
story,
my gosh,
ended up
that's a
to
good
where
story.
you like were killing it in credit
Yeah,
card collecting. So tell me about
yeah.
that.
So that's a great. I can't believe that you would put that in this portion of the talk. That's so good. So I worked for in 2003. I had a base in 2003 was
20
two,
years ago.
2002 was
We just had a baby
really,
and we moved.
really hard. I'm not sure. Did I talk about that? All the things that happened in that one week?
All I know is that they say the most
Oh,
stressful, what are the most stressful things? Death, marriage,
having a baby,
having a getting married,
dying,
die,
maybe become dead, nursing pregnant, or maybe become pregnant, dead, death of a spouse,
moving,
or maybe
a
become
job
dead,
change. I mean,
job
it's all,
change,
yeah.
moving, financial pressure, health problems. And I remember we went through all five of those in like 6 days in 2002. I think I'll save that one for another.
Yeah, but
We'll
go
we'll
back to
we'll do that on the
back
parachute
to the
one. What to
order.
do when everything is going south.
Back to
Um,
order.
but I was doing credit card collections in 2002, and I was working for a guy named Doug Reynolds, who God bless him for giving me a job. He met me at Nordstrom and said, "Hey, you seem like a good guy. I run a sales team. If you're ever looking for a job, let me
To
know."
clarify, you were working at
I
Nordstrom
was working
at
at
that time.
Nordstrom.
Yes.
Yeah, that was bottom of the barrel for me at that point. I love shopping at Nordstrom, but working there was not my favorite experience. I got fired from Nordstrom actually for my customer complaint about 2 weeks later, and I called Doug Reynolds. I had his card, and I called him, and I'm like, dude, I need a job. I'm gonna be starving to death here. I just got fired from Nordstrom, which I thought was the bottom of the barrel, and now there is no barrel. I'm going over. It's one thing to go over Niagara Falls in a barrel. It's something else to just go over Niagara
Okay,
Falls.
wait. The customer complaint, because I'm like, we can't just glance over this. The
What's that?
customer complaint at Nordstrom's was, "We're from Texas, y'all. We were born and raised in
Yeah,
Texas, and
yeah.
we were not living in Texas when you worked at Nordstrom." And you had said, "Howdy, partner,"
And I
and they
said,
got
"Howdy, partner," and
offended.
he stuck his finger in my face and used explicatives and said, "I'm not your blankety blank. partner.
So just wanted to clarify that the customer complaint was
So yeah, the howdy
not
partner.
not that
We'll
you
keep
had
that
done
in the deep
anything.
south.
Yeah, not that you had done anything necessarily grievous, but so you have a
Yeah.
new job. You're working. You've got a 2-year-old. If it's 2002,
2002,
you have
Matto
a
was
2-year-old.
gonna be
I'm
born.
pregnant. We
Matto
have
was gonna be
a
born. She was gonna
we
be
have a
born. She wasn't born yet.
5-year-old.
Yeah.
We have a 2-year-old.
Yep.
We're pregnant. We
Yep.
just relocated.
We're on public assistance for healthcare at the
Yeah.
Palomar Hospital, where English was the second language.
Yeah.
There,
Yeah.
we were on the other side of where we were trying to go there.
Yep.
Palomar County Hospital
It's
on
not
Medi-Cal.
no longer there anymore.
Yeah.
But
And Madeline, we were pregnant with Madeline. I had lost my job. I crashed my car the week before with the paper route. So I had a paper route, and I was working at Nordstrom. Crashed my car, totaled that, and then we went to go buy another car based on my day job. This is right before credit card collections, and then I lost my day job crashed my car on a Wednesday, bought a new car on a Friday, lost the paper route over the weekend because I missed too many papers because I was walking at that point. And then I lost the job on Monday that I was going to use to qualify for the car loan. And because the car place was closed, the banks were closed on the weekends. They did proof of employment on the following Tuesday to actually officially approve the bank loan for the car that I had driven off the lot the previous Saturday. And then they said, we can't approve your car loan. You have to bring it back in because I
you
had
don't have a job.
fired from that job on Monday. And then the company goes out of business on Wednesday.
Good times.
And because they were out of business, they stopped making COBRA payments, which means I was no longer able to qualify for COBRA. And we found out that Jessica was pregnant Thursday with number 3. And at that point, we're living in an apartment with bars on the windows in Escondido. It was literally the cheapest apartment in San Diego County in the apartment for rent guide. And Jessica somehow magically found this place and was able to save us some extra money on housing. And it was in that situation that Mr. Doug Reynolds comes in to me at Nordstrom, where I think I'm walking to work or taking the bus or something. And he says, hey, you got a good attitude. I run a sales team. If you're ever looking for a job, give me a call. And that was it. And then I get fired from Nordstrom like a month later. And I call Doug, and I'm doing credit card collection. And we're starving. It was so bad. I had a base salary, which was a recoverable, I think it was a non-recoverable draw on a monthly basis for $1,800 a month. Now you figure, even though it was 2003, if you do a multiplier based on the Bureau for Labor Statistics,
well, I think the rent was like $620 or something.
$820.
$820.
Yep,
Okay.
it's $820.
It was it was quite the stretch.
But if you look at, we're living in a depressed area in Escondido post September 11th, and I say depressed because economically all the IT companies, telecoms were shutting down, and so I just took whatever job I could get. So at $1,800 a month, multiply that by 1.6, which is about your inflation adjuster, and that's what, $2,500, $2,800 a month, somewhere in there. So we're living on that as my base salary, and I'm waiting tables at night. I think I got a job waiting tables at night because I could walk to the restaurant was the main feature for that choice of employment. And I'm working, and this guy, I was at the credit card collection agency for like 6 months, and there was a Greek guy there named Pete something, and he had this beautiful Greek last name, beautiful facial features, and this black, graying, curly black hair. He was a chain smoker, and he had a voice kind of talking like this, kind of like the alien in Monsters Inc., where she goes, always watching. It was like that, and that's what this guy sounded like. And he knew that I had kids and that I was starving and that I worked hard and I had a good attitude, and I was always nice to the guy. And I'm walking out. This talk about order and structure. You had to clock in at 8:30 or 8:31 where you get written up. You had to clock out at 10 o'clock and clock back in at 10:10 for a break. Those were usually the smoke breaks for everybody that worked in the data center. And then you had to clock out at 12:30 or 12:31 and clock back in at 1:30 or 1:31 into your computer. Clock out at 3 o'clock and clock back at 3:10 and clock out at 5:30 or 5:31, or you would get written up, and make 250 calls a day, every day, with an auto dialer sitting there. As soon as you put the phone on, your phone would ring and somebody would from the computer would. I mean, it was just It was insanity, but I needed it
Oh, it
because I
makes
was.
me think of Chris Gardner's story and his and how the fact that he had learned that if he
Oh my
doesn't hang
gosh.
up the phone and just pushes it with the finger instead of hanging it up, that he could
Yeah,
get like 4 more phone calls a day or something like
exactly
that.
right.
So
It was that
you
level
were
of
in that.
desperation to try to do it. And at that point, and this here's the lesson. There's the story. The point is, know your KPIs and count them. If you want to make it in sales, one of the greatest lessons that I learned from Frank Betcher's book, How I Raised Myself from Failure to Success Through Selling, is keep records.
And you used to have a jar, like a mason jar,
Yeah,
and a pile of pennies.
I would have a coffee cup because the mason
Oh, a
jar you have
coffee
to
cup.
reach too
Oh,
high.
too high.
The
Okay.
arm would get tired, but I would have 2 cups,
Mm-hmm.
and then they got mad at me. They're like, "What are you doing with the thing? It's making too much noise." Because it was ding, 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 and everybody's like, "What is all that ding? What's the ding?" So I took a piece of paper and I made a cone, and then I took a stapler, put a stapler, and I had this paper cone in the second cup, and I would
For
so
every call that you
for
made?
every call I would make, and I would make sure I got 75 calls in before lunch, before I clocked out at 12:30, and then 75 calls before I clocked out, and that would get me to 150. That was my KPI for calls, but that was down, and they would get mad at me because you're supposed to make 250 calls a day. Um, but I'm walking out one day. I'm in like month 6. I'm starving. I'm making 200, $300 a month in commissions on top of my draw, if I'm
Mm-hmm.
lucky. And I'm having to, put my monkey suit on and go wait tables. So I would clock out at 5:30, and then I was on the clock at 6 at the restaurant. So I would have to take this 2 and 3 day old bib with nasty salad dressing in the back of the trunk and stick that on and kind of scrub it off in the bathroom and pat it dry with paper towels in the 30 minutes that I had to drive from clocking out at the credit card collection agency to clocking in for dinner rush at Coco's on the nights that I was on, which was probably 4 nights a week. I mean, this is insanity just so that we can have $50
Mm-hmm.
left over at the end of every month with all of our bills paid and not get evicted from our piece of junk apartment with bars on the windows. Where Jay, the meth addict, broke broke in one time and was
Oh,
trying
yeah.
to get ice out of our ice
That's a
maker.
whole other story.
Oh,
But well, I want you to.
so
I hope that the people that are
so
listening understand that from my point of view, this is when I knew when you were going through that season. This is when I knew that we were going to
I
be
hope
okay.
you never have to go through that
But
season of
for
life.
me, as a stay at home mom who's got 3 kids, who's obviously having to be as creative as I can be with a potato, I'm looking at it going, wow, we're gonna be great. Like we're gonna be so rich one day because having somebody and being
That's funny.
married.
That wasn't what I was thinking.
No, you're the one in the battle. You're the one in the heat of it. But from those
Oh
of
my
us
God.
that, those of us that are in the background that are watching, the reality of having somebody in your corner, having somebody in your life that is willing to do the work and put the effort in is a testament of its own of where you're going. So you were counting, I believe also that maybe this is where you're getting, but it ended up being
Gotta
that
get
you
to
went
pee.
from counting to.
So KPIs.
Right.
The moral of the story is I was counting the wrong thing.
Mm.
I was counting calls. Calls are a metric, but they weren't the KPI that I needed
Mm.
to focus on. And I'm walking outside. We all clock out. It's herd mentality. We all clock out at 12 o'clock, or we all clock out at 10 o'clock. And Pete leans over to me. He knows I'm starving to death. He's a
Mhm.
super good guy, just this sweet guy who has to be a total jerk on the phone in his mind to be able
Yeah.
to do credit card collections. And but he was a very sweet guy, and he reaches over and he goes, "Hey kid, you're working real hard, but you're counting the wrong thing." And I go, "I'm counting the wrong thing?" And he says, "Yeah, you're counting the wrong thing. You're counting how many dials you make, and that has nothing to do with nothing. What you ought to be counting is how many net new people you get on the phone each day." And I said, "Okay, well, how many net new people should I be getting on the phone each day?" He says, 3. You just need 3 net new people on the phone each day because you're going to get a new work in progress of new accounts all the time. So you'll have people coming into your work in progress and you'll have people going out of your work in progress. And you're going to disqualify them from making payments as fast as you possibly can. But in order to disqualify somebody and keep new work in progress coming in, you got to get them out, which means you got to get them on the phone. You get 3 net new people on the phone each day, and you'll be in the top 5% of credit card collectors for the rest of your career. And it was one of those eye-opening moments in the 10 minutes between clocking out and clocking in with this 50-something-year-old dude who sounded like he was, 6 months away from getting a stoma put in, on a smoke break, and he gave me this pure solid gold Fort Knox bar
That you still use
of
today,
gold
to
that I
this day.
still use to this day. Is the right KPI, which is you've got to be able to get net new people coming into the mix of the pipeline. If it's stagnant and you just work every lead you've got to death and you never branch out beyond that, and literally the next month, I think I made $4,000 in commissions. Now, $4,000 for the folks listening out there is not very much money. I recognize that. I think the average 2-income family in the United States and Canada makes $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 a month, and that's those are in the states in the middle of the country where there may not be a lot of stuff going on economically. But when you're living on $2,000 a month and working part time at a restaurant 4 days a week to carve out another $700 or $800, and all of a sudden you get a $4,000 commission check, and the first thing you notice is, oh, people that make a little more money pay a lot more in taxes. Is the first thing you notice. The second thing was like, I could actually afford to put the full tank of gas all at the same time. I could put all 12 gallons in my tank at the same time. And all of a sudden, we started to have these options. So I really got serious about keeping records and disciplining myself to adhere to some certain minimum tolerances. And I think I did. I had 60 or 70 first touches, first net new people that next month. And then I was in the top 5 collectors, like for the rest of the time that I was at the agency. And then when that rolled over to Perfigo,
didn't you get it down to there's a certain ratio? Like if you can get them on the phone, you can close the deal a certain percentage of the time.
that was the other thing. I started keeping track of the ratios. So, and I got serious about order and structure with regard to keeping records. So there's 3 KPIs for an inside sales rep. Number 1 is calls. Number 2 is first touches. And number 3 is meetings booked, right? If you're not actually closing the deals yourself. And so I took those 3 KPIs and the ratios between calls and first TOs and meetings booked and dollars booked. And the ratios between those, and I mapped them out on a burn down chart, and we can talk about burn down chart another time, but it's a way of making visual the information that's sitting in a spreadsheet. And I took that to Perfigo and turned unbelievable numbers of productivity on the board. My numbers at Perfigo, I just remember them that year because it was so impactful. I made 10,800 phone calls in a year, which sounds like a lot, but it's not. It's like 20 a day. I made 20 or 30 a day. I made 10,800 phone calls. I had 1,350 net new people on the phone. From that, I booked 550 meetings. And from that, I got 179 POCs, 79 net new logos, and $4.2 million in sales revenue from that. And if you look at the ratios, the ratios between the control numbers for the calls at 10,800 and the ratio for first TOs, that's about 6 to 8%. So I was able to get if you make 100 calls, you get 6 to 8 people on the phone. And if you get 6 to 8 people on the phone, if you have incredible conversion ratios to first meetings, which because of the product and just where we were in the market, I was able to get literally 40.0% conversion. So if I talked to 10 humans on the phone, I'd get 4 meetings scheduled.
Well, and I'd like to go back a little bit in what you were saying that your father-in-law said about sometimes you can, criticize something or analyze something to death. I think that
I think it's true.
I think that what we also have to understand
me,
is
anyway.
but that is falling in line with one of your strengths from, one of your main
Maximizer.
strengths is maximizer, and
That's
that's
right.
in Strengths Finder, Strengths Finder 2.0.
Strengths Finder with Marcus Buckingham.
With Marcus Buckingham and the Gallup polls. And so as a maximizer, I find it interesting because I watched you throughout all these years go through all of these different processes to the fact to where you even got to not just first, you would get to making sure that you got the key decision maker on the phone. It wasn't even
That's right.
enough to just get a new person on the phone. You
That's right.
ended up maximizing it. You ended up analyzing it to the point to where you're saying, I keep getting into, dead ends when it comes to I'm getting new people on the phone, but we're not closing any deals. And because you were
That's
able
right.
to pinpoint the fact that you needed a key decision maker, you would begin asking, who's the manager, who's the account manager for this job, who's the person that's going to make a decision on whether you're going to buy or not.
That's right.
Who's that? And once you would find that out, then you would call them and make them your first touch, your
That would
first
count.
TO.
Then I would count it as a first
And
TO.
that would be counting
That's
as your
right.
first TO.
That's
It's
right.
very much in line with Brian Tracy's focal point, and like
Yep.
putting 80%, if you're putting
Focal point's so
80%
good.
of your time into the things that making you the most money, going straight to the decision makers, straight to those TOs and counting those. As you were talking, it made me really think about anybody who's trying to grow anything. If you're trying to grow a new church, are you counting the amount of people that you're talking to every day? Are you talking to new people every
Are
day?
you counting the number of
Are you?
touches a new
Yes.
person gets when they walk through the door? I mean,
Right.
that's a metric.
Yeah, and we
right?
do at the church that we belong to, and
It's
and
7 to 9 touches, I think,
yeah,
from the greeter handshake to greeter in the hall to usher for the seat to
mhm,
the bag with the pen and the little pamphlet giveaway to handshake on the way out to somebody that prays for you to say
Yep.
goodbye in the parking lot. And it doesn't mean that you're necessarily systematizing um, the the forcing of something,
Right.
right? But if you have structures in place and you make them habit, um, there's a quote that I heard. I have not been able to substantiate it, but it was supposedly from Mikhail Baryshnikov, and he said, again, I'm paraphrasing a quote that I can't substantiate, but
That's
so I've
okay.
heard that Mikhail Baryshnikov said of his practice in stretching and dance and muscle pliability that fundamentals are the building blocks of fun. And my good friend Mike Downs, who was a coach for me as I went into the full-time consulting business and had that 1 year retainer with that large technology company that basically freed us up. I mean, I've never been so free in my life as I was that year, 2019. He said, when you do something and do it and do it and do it and do it and get down into a rhythm and everything, then after it becomes a routine, after you've built all those habits, then your natural personality will come out, right? Your natural nuance versus like method acting, which is I have to do it exactly like this person is, and I live and I eat and I breathe in that thing, and then I become that person. It's more like method behavior to where you do your routines to the point where they become so second nature that your natural subconscious self, your real truth person of self. And that's what this whole thing is. Order is not about you have to be religious and meticulous because we say so. It's that the universe demands structure and order and discipline. I mean, you don't pick corn at day 80 or
Mhm.
day 100. You
That's
pick it
right.
at day 90.
Mhm.
Knee high by July is so I'm
Mhm.
told for the folks that grow corn. They wanted it knee high by July. And the reason why they want it knee high by July is because it needs to be harvested in August, I guess, in order to be ready to make it to market by September. And it's too cold July, June, May. It's too cold to plant in April. And if you plant it in June, you won't be knee high by July, and you'll miss the chance to
Right.
sell. So there are certain parameters to life, and so order to me is really about just understanding the way things really are, adhering to those parameters in your life, paying your taxes, paying your bills on time, going to the doctor when you need it, brushing
Well,
and
it's
flossing
the
your
same
teeth.
as if you have a
So you
budget
can,
for your finances, which we're going to go over in a future podcast about
yep,
finances. Your time budgeting. It's simply all you're doing is
that's right.
you're if you treat your time as you would treat your bank account, hopefully we're not all running around with bouncing checks all over the place and we're running out of time, we're running out of money. The question is, are we running out of time? And if you are finding yourself running out of time, and you're finding yourself exhausted by the end of the day, and you're finding yourself having put one thing on your list and never ever getting to it, the chances are it's because you're lacking some systems in place and perhaps having a checklist like yours. So tell me, I know we only have, we've been talking for quite a while, but tell me on your checklist for the things that you mark off to make sure that you remain in order. To me, the entire checklist is a example of order, but what are your things that you check off each day that come in line with
Yeah,
order?
let's get to that for just a minute. Um, so the checklist itself is order,
Yes.
right? With regard to structure, I would say the mile marker, knowing what my single goal is, which is usually whatever the biggest deal is that
Mm-hmm.
I'm working on. And then I have a date that I want to close that deal. And I have other deals, right?
Right.
You always have lots of deals in flux and a pipeline in sales. But I've got one big deal that's going to make the number for the year. And I'm looking for that, even if I haven't named that deal on my checklist on that mile marker.
Are you aware of it?
Am I
And if
aware of
you
it?
are,
Do I
you
know
can
it?
check
Am
it
I
off.
hunting for? Am I looking for? And
Right.
have I found what the name of the account is for that deal? Um, and then lift, walk, stretch for health. And then um, I would say the big ones that have come up in the last 6 months is I have 3 board of directors meetings with myself every single day. I have a board of directors meeting for all of my open go lives. When you have cloud software, they buy it, you contract against it, you provision it, and then you put hands on keyboards and start implementing and customizing it the way that it needs to be. And then you cut over from your on prem systems over to the cloud systems. That cutover is a very vulnerable time because you have a production system on prem, it's working however well it's working, and then now you're cutting over to you're flipping the switch over to the production system. So anything related to a cutover, a customer cutover, I go through all of my open action items on every cutover that we've got coming up in the calendar. And then anything that would be considered a cap case. Cisco folks would know what a cap case is, but it's basically a 911 customer sat Sev 1 alert that would have CEO level visibility that could derail that customer from ever doing business with you again. So that's one bucket, right? Go lives and cap cases. I have a board of directors meeting with myself every single day around those items, and I cross that off. I have a board of directors meeting for all of my deals and all of the aspects of project management and planning for each of the deals. And I've got 9 train tracks, which we can go into another time. You can ask about it in the comments. I've got 9 train tracks for each deal. Each train needs to get to the station before the deal can close. And so whatever the slowest train is needs to get some encouragement along the lines. And then I have a board of directors meeting every day with myself around every next action on every deal in the pipeline every single day, which I learned from Rohit when I was at Perfigo. Those 3 board meetings represent order. And then on the back page, I have the algorithm checklist for what to do in each of those 3 board meetings so I don't have to think about where I'm at with the next step.
That's a good point because I would,
Just
as
like your
it
checklist
sounds,
manifesto or your
yeah,
airplane checklists.
it sounds exhausting. Okay. Like, let's be real. Like, let's be honest. This
I'm
sounds
sure it
exhausting.
sounds exhausting, and
However,
maybe you're exhausted
and
listening to me talk about it, but I
and
can tell you that I get
it's a
exhausted.
beautiful mind, folks.
I
But
get exhausted when I
that's the
don't
point. That's what
have
I was
that
gonna
level of
say.
order and
Is
structure.
that
Then
that
my
is
mind goes haywire because
yeah,
I don't know where I ought to be.
yeah,
And I
yeah.
don't want to have to spend time thinking about what I want to be doing, what I ought to be doing. I don't want to spend time thinking about what I need to wear or what
I
I'm
know.
going to eat.
Yeah,
When we go to a restaurant,
I
what
know.
do we say when we go to a restaurant? What do I
I know.
always
I
say?
do the ordering.
Order for me. I'll
Order
pay
for
for it. Just tell me what I'm eating because I don't care and I don't want to put any effort into thinking about what I'm going to eat. Just open mouth, insert food, get back to work, get back to what I was doing. So those 3 board meetings represent order, and then I have 4 additional check boxes for each of buckets of tasks, and those buckets of tasks are divided into danger, things that could kill me if I don't do them,
hmm
like filing a tax extension or handling a customer sat issue that is escalated to 3rd level VP
Right.
or any of those things. Those could kill me. They could kill my career. They could kill our finances, right? If you don't file your taxes, if you don't pay your bills, they'll find a way to come and take the money or the car or whatever it's attached to. So those are things that could kill you. Then I have things that could cut you, which are at risk.
hmm
Then I have things that could scrape you, which is your review, stuck, waiting, anything that's waiting on somebody else. And then I have stuff that's work in progress. So I literally go through 3 board meetings a day and 4 groups of buckets of tasks every single day before we get to prospecting, which that'll be another conversation. And to me, that's what's on my checklist and the checklist itself as far as order. Then also, when you think of what does structure look like when it's done properly, to me, it's an organized mind where
Mm-hmm.
nothing's in my head. My inboxes are at 0 at the end of the day. My paper's all been processed at the end of the day. All of my calendar meetings have been reviewed, right? Number 2, my calendar. Calendar meeting invites go out. If I'm doing 5 to 7 meetings a day, which is not even, I know executives that do 30 meetings a day in the calendar. I'm doing 6 to 8 meetings a day in the calendar and then other calls. But those invites need to go out. The follow ups, the thank yous to customers for meeting with me, those things, they need to go out that day. And then your routine, which is the checklist, needs to be adhered to. And then record keeping. Record keeping has to do with how you're
So
prospecting and where your burn down charts are for your revenue targets. So that's, to me, that's what I have to do
one
in
could
order to make it
almost
work.
subtitle this podcast today the Jeff Heilman Project Management, because this is exactly what you're talking about. You're talking about project
Yeah,
management. But here's to speak
the
to,
wrecking ball.
let's speak to something for these last few minutes, because I know that there are a lot of our listeners, or a lot of people, especially coming out of the pandemic, especially coming out of COVID, that in all reality don't have a lot going on. I mean, clearly you yourself are very complex. You're very detailed. You can analyze and maximize yourself to the nth degree. But what would you say to somebody who's looking to do more with their life? Like, I know my own advice to my own children would be, say, hey, start, building into your routine for the day. I mean, there's a lot of people, let's be honest, that just have, like, wake up and go to sleep. And if they only had anything that they would put on their structured list, would be like, okay, I'm going to now wake up at 8:30, and I'm going 8 a.m., and I'm going to go to bed at 9:30. But they don't have any direction, they don't have any focus, they don't not because they are lazy, there's just not much going on. They don't
Well, I
have
do think there's a
how
line.
can you.
I think there's a line in the sand
Mhm.
that um, I think most people are on the other side of this line in the sand. And I don't think this will ever change. I was on the other line of the sand for a long time. I think there's people who are playing offense, and I think there's people who aren't.
Mhm.
And I don't mean that to be insulting.
Yeah.
I'm not judgmental. I remember reading in Glenn Bland's book, and we covered this on the podcast 2 sessions ago. Glenn Bland said that his life changed when he read that there are people who make plans and dictate terms of life and existence to everybody around them in order to get them to help, you know,
Yeah.
accomplish the project. And then there's people who don't have plans and they're dictated to. They're told where they can live. They're
Mhm.
told what kind of car they can drive. They're told how often they can go to Taco Bell
Mhm.
because they just don't have any money. They don't have any
Their
resources.
bank account
Their
is telling
bank
them
account
what
is
they
telling
can
them
and
what you
can't
can
do.
and can't do. And I got sick and tired of being dictated to by my lack of planning. So I just said, well, if that's all I have to do to decide how often, if I want to go to Taco Bell every single day, they're not sponsoring this podcast, but they could be someday. But if I wanted to be able to go to Taco Bell or
Not
Subway
if I have
sandwich,
anything to say
yeah, not
about
if you have to say
it. Health
anything to
food,
say
honey,
about
health food.
it. Life
We
guys.
just did a health episode last week.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, they have great taco sauce. It's good. Sometimes I just eat the packets. I just drive through and get the packet.
That explains a lot.
If you want to be able to go to Taco Bell every day, this would be a nice one for the reels, right? If you want to be able to afford to go to Taco Bell every day, you have to have plans in place to pivot from playing defense and saying, I hate my job. I'm just going to work to do the absolute minimums because I don't want to lose my house, or I don't want to lose my spouse, or some other bad thing that could happen if you don't keep working. And then if you cross over that line and say, no, I'm going to start telling life what I demand of it. Like life,
Well, I think
life, there's a poem, I bargained with life for a penny and life would pay no more. And then one day at the end of my day, I counted my scanty store. Um, uh, I looked at my numbers, only to learn dismayed that any price I had asked of life, life would have willingly paid. Something like that. And life will pay what you demand of it, but you must first demand a level of discipline and order and structure and planning of ourselves. And then once we do that, we start dictating terms to life, and then life starts paying us. And the truth is, the reason why I'm not judgmental about people who may not feel like they've crossed over that line is because actuary tables and numbers say 98% of the people on earth will fail to get what they want out of life, and they will get to age 65 or 70, and they will either be dead, or they'll be dead broke, or they'll be dependent on neighbors, friends, and relatives, or the government for assistance. I didn't make that statistic up. It's Social Security Administration numbers, and it's never changed in 120 years since they've been keeping track. But that doesn't mean that somebody listening to this podcast can't cross over that line for themselves and start making plans and say, I'm going to be part of that 2 or 3% that dictates terms to life. And I just was dumb enough to believe that I could actually cross over and be somebody who made plans and got disciplined. Do you have to be this disciplined? Obviously not, because there's people that are way more successful than me that don't even write stuff down. I can tell you a list of half a dozen people at the company where I'm working that make $1 million a year, and they don't even take notes in meetings. They just keep it all in their head. Doesn't mean you have to do it like this. I have to do this because I go insane if I don't. But all that needs to happen is you got to have a clear picture where you're going, take consistent, persistent action, and then you end up building a groove to the record. Now, I'm dating myself now, right? A groove to the CD. Don't even do those anymore. But you're grooving that record to the point where eventually the groove is sharp enough and deep enough that the needle can't skip very easily out of that groove, and it stays in its track, and it ultimately gets to the station and gets you what you want out of
So
life.
for those who are trying to step over that line, they want something greater from their life. They want to do more, be better, have more out of life. You can do something just as simple as challenging yourself to. We used to make sure that we read a book. Like just pick a book, any book. We
Underline
would
10 things before
underline
you go to
10
bed.
things before you go to bed, or read 4
One thing.
pages. Audible. There's so much more. There's so many more ways that we can consume quality content today than 27 years ago when we first got started. There's podcasts, there's videos, there's Audible. Just making sure that whatever it is that you're doing when you're trying to get over the hump is the making part of your order, part of your structure for that day, to build into it personal growth, to build into it some form of
That's right.
something
And
that you would like
and
to
I can tell you, like,
have.
life is great now, right? We got the Benz now, we got the nice house now, we got the 7 kids now, sure. But we lived in an apartment with bars on the windows where drug dealers did break in, and moths did sometimes corrupt. We lived like that for 9 years on less than $2,000 a month for 9 years with 3 kids in the state of California in the common era. This is not 1940. This is 1996 through 2004. Well, yeah, basically 96, 7, 8, 99, 2000, 2001, 2002, 2003, 8.5 years.
Mm-hmm.
We lived on $2,000 a month. So it wasn't an overnight deal by any means, but we were consistent and persistent. And I will tell you that for anybody out there who may have not believed that I give my wife due credit, I can tell you that the blueprint and the map for why we are where we are today came from my wife, who was raised by Dan Gray and Pam Chavez, Keith Cordero, and Marcella Guadagna, and Grandma Carol,
There
and
was a
Grandpa
village.
Gil. There was
There was a
a
village.
village, and that village gave her the blueprint that
Uh,
I, hung on to like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory's golden ticket to try to get to some semblance of discipline and structure and order. so that we could pay our bills on time, so that we could take care of our
Mhm.
kids and scale our family up. And we are we're we're not the people we play on Instagram, right? We're regular people who work insanely hard with a tremendous amount of passion and a marriage that is deeply connected to each other, to our faith, and to our kids and our family and our tribal community. And that over time the habits have been made to get
Mhm.
us to the point where we could have the life that we have today. And I mean, there's nobody I know who started out with worse circumstances than I did personally before I met you. Obviously, I got
Mhm.
much better when you came along. Um, but I don't know anybody personally that had circumstances much worse than that, who who had farther to go, who had more problems to overcome, more emotional difficulties, and required more training and hard work just to even survive and not die than I did. But but it can be done, and if it can be done by one person, then it can be done by anybody because God's no respecter of person.
Well, let's just I'm just going to close with this. You know, this the statement goes,